Hi, today we have a very special guest feature from Sveriges Riksbank. Did I pronounce that right?
That's correct. Yeah, pretty good. Mm.
Perfect. So that's Sweden's central bank. We're taking a closer look at its history as the world's oldest surviving central bank. Joining us today is Gary Watson. He works in the communications division at the Riksbank. Hi,
Yeah.
so welcome. Thank you.
Hello. Well, thank you.
So, my first question is more of an introduction. I
Yep.
think it would be interesting to start with, like, you telling us a bit about yourself and your work at the Riksbank.
Yep. Okay. Well, as you correctly said, my name is Gary Watson, and by the sound of the name, you realise that I'm not Swedish. I'm actually British by birth, but I moved here too long ago for me to say. No, I've been here nearly 40 years. So I moved here
Oh, wow.
in my early 20s after university. So I'm fluent in both Swedish and English, of course. And I've worked as a translator for most of that time, from Swedish to English. I ran my own company for 25 or so years before I joined the Riksbank here as an employee. And I work now with different forms of communication, but essentially I take care of the English content on our website. So
Mhm.
everything that we produce, so all our reports, our economic commentaries, staff memos, press releases, etc., everything is basically published simultaneously, both in Swedish and English. And that's because Sweden is an open, small but open economy, and we want
Mhm.
everybody to know which way the interest rate is going or whatever. So I mean, obviously, the readership is much larger if you translate everything into English, which is the major language of business in the world. I also work with technology, so we've embraced technology in the translation and production of our reports. So we use AI translation tools to quicken up the process, and I'm responsible for the systems that we use for that. And I also do this kind of thing. So I do presentations to upper secondary schools, for example,
Oh,
and I do guided tours of the Riksbank. So when people, primarily architects and people, come and want to look at the building, which dates from 1975. It's our third building in our history, and it's a very interesting building. So lots of people want to come, and when we have visitors from IMF and different places, I tend to show them around. And I showed Christine Lagarde around once a few years ago, but that's a
oh
feather in my cap.
my God. And that's perfect. We need a tour
Yeah,
guide for today
yeah,
to introduce us to the history of the Riksbank,
yeah,
also the building, everything. History is so rich.
yeah.
And this is also amazing. Like, you have so many roles in the Riksbank
Mm,
and like such an important career, but also like so many different responsibilities. How do
mm.
you handle that?
No, I have help. So, I mean, obviously, at a central bank, you make sure that there's more than one person doing the different jobs. So, if I can't show somebody around, somebody else can do it. Maybe not as a native English speaker, but I mean, Swedes are very good at English, as are
Oh yeah.
Danish people. Sorry for it. Danish people, or Scandinavians are very good at English. So they do a competent job. And then I have two other native speaking translators who do most of the translation work. So, I mean, I help out. Yeah, when the burden gets too great. So now, for
Yeah.
example, we've just had a interest rate decision. So we have the minutes of the meeting. We also have the first draft of the financial stability report, for example. So the May is a very busy time for us. So I tend to do more translation than for example, last month, where I hardly did anything because there was no great burden on the rest of them. So I mean, I think that's an important thing. The central bank is not well, not yet anyway, an extremely streamlined bank. That's just looking at the costs and everything and trying to cut costs all the time. Obviously, we're cost aware, but we make sure that there's duplicity duplication in all the jobs that are done. There are five Riksbank governors, for example, or one governor and four deputies. So.
Yes, makes total sense. And
Mm.
going back to what you said, yes, Swedes are really good with English and Scandinavians in general. I was very impressed. Sometimes we travel around and there's a communication barrier. Did not feel that in Sweden at all. But yeah, that's very important to have other people that are able to work like with you as
Yeah,
well.
help or support.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
support. Yeah, that's really important.
Mm.
So now moving on a little bit, could you
Mm.
tell us a little bit about the origins of the bank and its relationship to the royal family through time? One fun curiosity for English speakers, um, at least for me, when I hear the word Riksbank, I associate it with Riskbank in risk.
Mm.
But Riks in Swedish means realm or kingdom, so it has nothing to do with risk.
That's right. Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, a lot of people ring up or cold call or cold email me and many of my colleagues and think we're a commercial bank. So we think like, obviously you have the Bundesbank in Germany, which is the central bank, but you also have Deutsche Bank, which sounds also
Yeah.
a bit. So when they say Riksbank or Sveriges Riksbank, they think, oh, this is a commercial bank. So I'll try and sell my wares. I'll try and sell my services to these people, but we're a central bank. So we have procurement rules and all that kind of things that we have to follow. That tends not to be very successful. And then your point about the word risk bank. If you Google the word risk bank, you get quite a few hits, but that's really it's really, of course, just a spelling mistake. Although I hope
Yeah.
none of these originate from our website because I'm responsible for that. But I mean, even when you're typing at speed, sometimes you write risk bank and you have to go back and correct it, of course. But essentially, a central bank, of course, is essentially a risk-averse institution. It takes virtually no risks at all. We don't buy equities, for example, that might, like in the last month or so, could fall through the floor. We only basically invest in government bonds, for example, and so forth. So very, very safe assets that we invest in for our currency reserves and so forth. And then your other point about the word Riks, or that stems from the word Rika, which, as you correctly said, means kingdom or realm. But Riks is a common prefix meaning national. So the Riksbank, the national or the central bank. We also have the Riksdag, which is like the Bundestag in Germany. It's the national parliament. And then it's in many authorities. So Riksrevisionsverket, that's the National Audit Board, for example. So Riks is a common prefix to lots of different words. Yeah, so the Riksbank was officially founded in 1668, which, as you also said at the beginning correctly, makes it the oldest central bank on the planet, so in the world. And initially it focused on lending to the government, the king, and the public, and focusing also on maintaining currency stability as well. So I guess it was more like a commercial bank in its early years, issuing banknotes and coins and holding deposits. Obviously, it came along later that we got a monopoly on issuing banknotes, but before that monopoly, all the different commercial banks could also issue their own banknotes. So that's, and its relationship with the royal family makes me think of like Prince Harry and people like that. They're sort of like the crown rather than the royal family. Always a bit stormy, to be honest, because Sweden is a very independent-minded country. So many of the authorities, and this is even several hundred years ago, many of the organizations and authorities have an independence, or at least a quasi-independence from the government. We are very independent from the government, but we were from the government. But at that time, from the beginning, the bank was placed under the Riksdag, the parliament, rather than under the crown. So the king, he wasn't too chuffed about that, because he wanted to use the bank to generate funds for military operations abroad, for example. Although he did exert considerable influence over the bank, so often he did get his way, but there was always that sort of disconnect, if you like, between the Riksbank and the crown. So it was under the parliament to start with, and then, of course, much later, several hundred years later, it also there was a disconnect between the parliament and the government and the Riksbank as well, as in many other Western countries where most central banks became independent in the 1990s at least.
Oh, uh, I'm sorry. I'll just interrupt a little bit. Could you just lower your camera just a little bit?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Or you want the other way?
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank
Mm,
you.
mm,
So going back to what you just told me, that's
mm.
really interesting. I really misunderstood. Of course, read a little bit
Yeah.
about the Riksbank before this interview, but I did not know it was under the parliament and all this convoluted history with the crown. I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of that. That's really interesting. So I think you will clear things up even more because I have a little bit of like I have a question when it comes to Stockholm's Banco
Mm,
that I've read is a predecessor of the Riksbank, and like how does it relate to its early history and success, and what happened with
mm.
the downfall of
Yeah.
the Stockholm's Banco?
Yeah. This is very exciting. So strap in.
Okay.
Oh yeah, this is real history. This. No, yeah, Stockholm's Banco was founded in the 1650s, I think, so a little bit before the Riksbank. And as indeed you can say it was a predecessor to the Riksbank. It was a forerunner. Stockholm's Banco was founded by a gentleman called Johan Palmstuk, a businessman, if you like, a merchant, and he came up with the idea of banknotes. So banknotes, they say that Sweden was the first country to sort of issue banknotes, or at least the first European country. Banknotes actually date back to the 7th century and Chinese dynasties. So we're quite a long way behind them. But the first banknotes essentially started to emerge in the mid 1600s, the mid 17th century. So he came up with the idea of banknotes, or credit notes as he called them, to replace Sweden's extremely heavy copper coins. I don't know if have you read this bit.
But I know they used copper coins. Did
Yeah.
not know they were extremely heavy.
Well, they weighed in at a staggering 20 kilos each. So we have,
Each?
yeah, so we have a copy of the first copper
Oh my
banknote in our little exhibition downstairs. I couldn't bring it up; it was too heavy. I could have
God,
shown it.
like 20 kilos, that's a lot. That's
You can find pictures of it online. It's quite easy to find. So they weighed 20 kilos. So you can imagine carting those around in the supermarket if you're buying coffee or
wow.
cheese or whatever.
I
So
need to use like a cart, those shopping carts,
yeah,
because I'm absolutely not able to lift 20 kilos
yeah.
at all.
Yeah, no, but they're very we actually have it rigged up so you can actually try and lift it up and down. So it's
Oh wow.
it's quite funny. But one coin was originally worth about 10 riksdaler, which is the forerunner of the Swedish krona. I'll come on to that a bit later. And rumor has it that one such coin would buy you a cow.
Oh wow.
So if you wanted to buy 5 cows, you'd have to have 5 slabs of 20-kilo copper in your wheelbarrow or whatever you used to cart them around. So obviously Palmstruck, he came up with this idea, said, if you deposit your coins with me at my bank, Stockholm's Banco, I will issue you with a credit note with the same value. So you can go and spend money with that instead, obviously making it much easier. And this became very popular, of course, because of the convenience of carrying around bits of paper instead of 20-kilo slabs of
Yes.
copper.
Like if you, sorry, just if you carry around that much, when you said for the cows, if you have to carry the copper, it's basically like you're carrying the cows yourself.
You have to carry their cow home as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could carry the coins, you can carry the cow.
Yeah. So anyway, so this all turned out to be a bit too easy, and Palmstruck, he was a bit of a sly operator. He realized that he could issue more of these banknotes without having the copper coins as collateral, because as I said, you took your coins to the bank and they were the collateral for you being issued the banknote, if you like, from the beginning. So he realized that he could issue more banknotes than there were copper coins. Okay. And consequently there was an over issuance of the copper coins, which eventually led people or made people, they lost trust in the bank. And that led to really, I think, probably one of the world's or Europe's first bank run. So people started going to the bank, saying, I want my copper coins back because I don't trust this system anymore. And of course, because he'd overissued them, there weren't that many coins to give back to the people. So that led obviously to the collapse of the bank. And it also led to the imprisonment. This is the juicy bit. They also led to the imprisonment and the sentencing to death of Pal. So he was sentenced to death for
Oh my
fraud,
God.
and embezzlement originally, but his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, and he died several years later in prison. But his ideas were sound. So the idea of printing banknotes was obviously a very sound one. So the Crown and the Parliament took over the bank, and that's how the Riksbank, the national bank, was founded. It was originally called Riksens Ständers Bank, and that was to reflect the the translation that will be the Bank of the Estates of the Realm. And estates means different groups. So an estate could be the nobility, the clergy, for example, peasants, burghers, that kind of thing. And that was when it was founded. And it was changed to Sveriges Riksbank probably in the 19th century, I think, or maybe in the 19th century, when Sweden started to modernize its political and financial systems. So that's basically the history behind the founding of the bank.
Wow. No, that was super interesting. I'm still stuck with the 20 kilos coins. That's a nugget of history that I'll never see again. That's amazing. So, thank you so much for this info. This was like juicy gossip, but history version.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to know a little bit about, you started to mention it. Sorry. But how has the Sveriges Riksbank So how has the Sveriges Riksbank evolved since then? I know you told me about the name change and the 18th century, but a little bit about its modernization and what happened since then.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, it was a central bank, as in that it printed money. I suppose that was the main thing. But I guess from the beginning, its activities were more akin to a commercial bank. So for the first few hundred years or so, and indeed, we didn't stop offering services to the general public until the late 1990s. So people could still come in, buy bonds, for example, and we held deposits for the general public right up to the 1990s. So in our current building downstairs in the main lecture hall, we still have the bank counters and the windows and the teller windows where people would come and do banking activities, if you like. So I guess the best approach to this question is in terms of sort of historical milestones in a way. As we sort of established before, in its early years, the bank was under royal influence, and it was used to generate money to support military campaigns and the like, or royal ambitions or whatever. And in the 19th century, the power shifted to the Parliament, which I've also gone through a little bit, with the royal authority being greatly reduced. And then we had the Riksbank Act, the Act of Parliament, in 1897. That was a big turning point, in which the role of the Parliament was strengthened in overseeing the bank, and it gave it a monopoly on note issuance, as I said before. So pre 1900 or so, or 1906, I think it came in. The other commercial banks, they could print their own money. So downstairs in our exhibition, we've got several 19th century banknotes from the different big banks in Sweden. But we received a monopoly, so only we could issue banknotes and coins from 1900. So that's an important, I think, milestone for us. And then I suppose more contemporary history, more history in terms of the last 30 or so years is rather important. In 1999, the Riksbank was granted full operational independence in setting interest rates. So politicians and any other outsiders are strictly forbidden from any involvement in rate setting decisions. We're not even allowed to ask people for their opinions about whether or not we should reduce or hike the interest rate. So that was a major reform in 1999. And at that point, we also switched to what's called inflation targeting, where an inflation target in most Western countries, it's 2%, was introduced. Other milestones, we were the first bank, I think, to publish a financial stability report in the mid to late 1990s. And we were also among the first countries to introduce negative interest rates in the mid 2010s to fight low inflation. And we were also among the first to investigate a central bank digital currency, which we call the e-krona. Hasn't been introduced yet. That's a parliamentary decision we have to wait for. But we've looked at various technical solutions to having a digital currency. And nowadays, of course, I think we're in the forefront here as well. We focus more on things like climate risks, financial stability, obviously, resilience of the payment system so that the payment system can withstand cyber attacks, bad state actors and so forth. And also, obviously, with the krona also coupled to the fact that the use of cash in Sweden has declined significantly since 2012 or so.
So sorry. I would just want to mention that that's something I really noticed when I was in Sweden. In Germany, people use cash a lot. When you go to establishments, when you go to restaurants, usually they ask for cash. I thought it would be the same in Sweden, but it's completely different. Everybody pays with their cell phone, everything. It's
Exactly.
very modern. I was very impressed.
In fact, only 8% of people, when surveyed, only 8% said they used cash for their last transaction.
Wow.
Less than 1 in 10 people use cash, basically. And most of that cash use is out in the country, in the sticks, in small towns, often by older people who don't really trust digital stuff. So they want to use the hard cash to pay for stuff. This is rather interesting because just as the use of cash started to decline, we decided to exchange all our banknotes, so to modernize them, to make them less, so that they can't be forged as much and so forth. And to stop counterfeit money coming into the city. So we had much better security on the notes and so forth. So in 2017, we exchanged almost all the notes and coins to new ones. But nobody uses them, so consequently nobody recognizes them anyway. I've not seen a 200 krona note, for example, or a 10 krona coin for ages. So I'd struggle to know what the value of it was, to be honest. That's also something that we've had to deal with.
Wow. But you were truly pioneers. You were the first in so many things, or amongst one of the first throughout time in history. That's really amazing. Because one of my questions was like, how did they just stood the test of time, and what do you think the future is? But I already know, like from what you said, that you are very future focused and very focused on like being the first ones to test things and to try new things. That's really impressive. I think a lot of central banks around the world are more conservative when it comes to that. They're not going to try something new. And I think it's interesting that you are up for modernization and to try new things like the e-krona that you mentioned. I think that's really interesting.
I think cash has started to make a little bit of a comeback in the last year or so due to the war in Ukraine and other things, which people are worried about contingency, about being prepared for war and so forth. And of course, cash is something that, if you look at what you're supposed to have at home in case of emergency, you're supposed to have a bit of cash so that it's because it's easier to buy stuff with cash. Obviously, when you go into if you go into a shop, they might not be able to, if the electricity has gone down, for example, they might not be able to open the cash register even. But I mean, it's easier to exchange money for goods, food, etc. if you use cash. So it's become a little bit more popular. But the interesting thing is that it's not just the consumers who feel it's easier to tap their phone and stuff like that. It's also shops and so forth. So they can decide that they don't want to take cash at all. So I'm sure you noticed in Sweden that there are many shops you go into and it says no cash. They don't take cash at all. So obviously it's cheaper for them because that cash management, the cash handling of going to the bank to deposit takings for the day and stuff like that. All that's risky because, I mean, you know, that you could get robbed. And also it's expensive because the banks charge you for handling their cash, your cash. So obviously the more digital it is, at least the less cost is involved, if you like.
Yes, there's a lot of also, I think, pressure when it comes to the employees handling cash and being like, oh, is this the right number? Did I miss something? Or maybe did that employee take a little bit of cash? And then when you have digital payment, there's like no, you don't even think about that. That's not even a possibility. So, of course.
But I think you mentioned, you asked about standing the test of time.
Yeah.
And so I'm obliged to say, I suppose, that, you know, the bank has stood the test of time very well. Otherwise, I might lose my job, I suppose, if I sort of said, "Oh, we've done a really bad job for this." But seriously, you know, I think it's done an excellent job through the years, and it's kept up well with developments, as you said. We've always been in the forefront of all these new developments, and it's also helped to maintain economic stability in times of crisis. So you know, in times of extreme stress, like the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. During world wars, during the pandemic, for example. So we had measures that, you know, we were very quick to take measures to shore up the economy, to make to improve bank liquidity, so that banks had money to lend and all that kind of stuff. So I think we've pretty done well. One interesting point of history, which I think maybe I'm surprised you didn't mention it in your questions, actually, but in 1992, to sort of ward off a currency crisis, we hiked the policy rate to 500%.
Oh my God, I missed that. I'm sorry. Please tell me about that.
That's a major thing. Well, the problem was that there was a bit of an attack on the krona. So the krona was in order to reduce the outflow of because what happens if you have low interest rates is that the krona people will start selling krona and there'll be a big outflow of it. And what happened was that it was a banking crisis, banking and currency crisis in 1992. Also turned out into I think that was our bigger crisis. To be honest, we did quite well staving off the financial crisis of 2008. We came out of that fairly unscathed because we'd had a big crisis in 1992, the early 90s, which then led to a lot of bank regulation. So we were prepared for what came along in 2007 and weren't so adversely affected by it. But in 1992, house prices collapsed. A couple of banks went bust, that kind of thing. And we were in order to shore up the economy or the currency or the exchange rate, which was pegged to the ESM, the forerunner of the euro at that time. We were obliged to hike the policy rate to 500% for a couple of days. It wasn't very long, and then we unpegged the currency from and let it float. So. Obviously, you know what happens then. So it was. I think we maintained stability, even though it was quite a shock to mortgagers who'd taken out mortgages and then found that their interest rates flew through the roof. But it was temporary. It was only a few days. So.
Did I hear it right? It was 500?
500%, yeah.
That's wow. That's very unique. I think I've never heard of that, like in history.
If you look on the internet, if you Google sort of 500% Sveriges Riksbank 1992, you'll find quite a lot of information about it. Probably better information than I can give you. I'm not an absolute expert on that particular thing.
No, but you're giving us so much information. You're being really amazing. Thank you so much.
But I think everything is, we managed to keep inflation pretty low and stable, and if we haven't, it's not really, I know this is sounds like a politician, but it's not really our fault. I mean, the surge in inflation in 2022 was really due to global supply chains and all sorts of things like that. So not that we couldn't do anything about it, but it wasn't, if you see what I mean, it affected everybody. So
just like you, just like you mentioned before, you're like aware of climate, for instance, and when it comes to global supply chains, climate change really plays a big role, and there's nothing you can do about it. As an institution like a central bank, you can be climate aware, but that is not that much, I believe, that you can do to control droughts in Africa that are affecting cocoa prices and coffee prices and
Yeah.
things like that. And
Yeah, of course we buy corporate bonds as well. Not many, but we buy corporate bonds. So the risk-free investment is sovereign bonds, is government bonds, if you like, treasuries from the United States, for example. Well, used to be risk-free. I'm not sure anymore. But anyway, but I mean, we make sure we don't invest in fossil-based companies, mining companies, that kind of thing. That's the kind of climate things. And obviously within the bank, we're very keen on recycling and all that kind of stuff. But you're quite right. A central bank, it's not really in the mandate to combat climate change. It's not. I mean,
yeah,
our mandate is to keep the economy safe and secure, and obviously investing in certain kinds of bonds is important for the currency and gold reserve. So that's the important thing.
yes, and like trying to withstand other things also, like war, like you mentioned, the
Mm,
war in Ukraine. Like
mm,
these are also things that you cannot control, but you
mm.
have to somehow manage to like maintain the stability of the economy, even though you can't control.
So I think I mean, if you're looking at, okay, we've now spent over 350 years doing this, what
Mhm.
challenges do we see in the future in terms of, money and all the rest of it, the kind of, what's in our mandate? I think the future challenges are obviously managing inflation is such a, global uncertainty. I mean, uncertainty is not something anyone in the financial sector wants, and
Yeah.
certainly not a central bank. You don't want uncertainty. You don't want households and firms being uncertain about what investments they're making. Whether they're buying stuff, because obviously that affects consumption, and then we end up in a recession. So I think managing inflation amid all this global uncertainty is an important thing, and certainly in the near term, developing this e-krona or another CBDC, central bank digital country, to cope with the digitalization or meet the digitalization of society and provide an alternative cash is important. I think it's important. I think when you do when you do sort of educational when you take educational measures, like when we provide the schools, for example, with some materials, and we try to stress the importance of telling people that there's a difference between central bank money and commercial bank money. So the money you have in your bank account, essentially, although there's often a deposit guarantee issued by the government, essentially you have a claim on the commercial bank. So, if you use Barclays or whatever, it's Barclays who are supposed to, if they go bust, what happens to your money? As I said,
Mhm.
of course, central banks, especially in the West, states don't go bust. We're backed by the state, so states don't go bankrupt. So that central bank money is very safe. And consequently, banks like to have central bank money themselves, so that they have safe investments, safe placements of their money as well. So I think it's important that people understand that's why we're looking for an alternative to cash, because cash obviously is also central bank money. When you have a banknote, you have a claim on the state, not on the commercial bank. Everything on your card, and for example, it's if you have a Barclays card, for example, that's the claim is on the bank. So I think it's important that we provide some kind of alternative to cash, certainly. And then the climate-related financial risks, both physical ones and transition ones, going over to a fossil-free or sustainable activities. I think we have to deal with quite a few risks there, even as a central bank. And then, of course, the resilience of the payment system. I was
Yes.
wondering the other day, this big electricity outage in Spain. Do you remember that?
Oh, no, that was gigantic.
Yeah.
I had a
Uh,
couple friends there. They were basically no internet, no nothing, no
yeah.
light.
Yeah, and you couldn't pay for stuff, I guess. I mean, you couldn't buy anything, or I mean, so the resilience of the payments, not just combating cyber attacks, but what happens if there's a big electricity outage or some other outage, or the network goes down in some other way. I think this preparedness and contingency planning is very important for us as a central bank. It's important for everybody, but it's important for us as a central bank. So I suppose all that boils down to is we're trying, in essence, to maintain monetary and financial security in the current global climate. So won't be easy, but I feel we're quite
Yes,
well placed to deal with whatever comes our way.
yes, that's very important.
Mm.
Thank you so much for these insights. I wanted to ask you like a final question.
Yeah,
That's okay. But you mentioned the tours and like the building itself
yeah,
and the history of the building. And I wanted to know if you could like tell us just a little bit about that,
yeah,
of the building and the tours, the exhibition that you'll
yeah,
usually have in it.
yeah. That's a whole new interview, I think, really. But I'll
Oh,
give you a couple of things.
sorry.
I think the history is interesting. We first building was in the old town of Stockholm. I don't know if you've been to Stockholm, but we have this lovely old town with all the narrow streets and dating.
The Gamla Stan.
Yeah, Gamla Stan. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
were Jan Torget, which is one of the southernmost squares, and the building's still there. So that was from the late the 1600s, and then we moved to where the Parliament is, not very far, but to the Parliament is, and shared the Parliament building with the Parliament until the 1970s. And then we moved into this building. So this building is now 50 years old, and this is a very special building. It's clad in a black granite, which gives this impression, and it's like a great big safe box in the middle of town. So if you're around and there was no sort of signs on and you ask somebody which of these buildings do you think is the central bank, they'd pick this one because it's like a big safe basically. But inside it's quite warm. You can't get much from the background here, but it's warm. It's a lot of light wooden furniture, sort of yellowish carpets to give the a nice to work. From the outside, very sort of sterile almost, and sort of not really approachable. You want to go in there, but that's good because we've got gold and stuff, so we don't want more kind of. But inside, it's really and there's lots of as quirks about it. We have 18 different wall and floor clocks, so grandfather clocks, grandmother clocks, all of which we acquired as collateral for loans in the sort of 1800s. And the people who deposited the collateral, they never came back. So
Oh, wow.
we've got loads of very antique clocks all over the place, which is rather interesting. And then lots of other artwork. The architect designer of this building was very keen on making sure there were things to look at as well. So there's the art collection is really quite fascinating as well.
Would you be able maybe to send us like a picture of the clocks? I think that's really, really
I
interesting.
can certainly send you a picture of some clocks.
No, not all.
I can't get them all together and
no. One clock is already
yeah, no,
enough.
I
Like
can do
just
that.
a
Yeah, sure,
picture of one
sure.
of the clocks, because
Yeah,
that's really interesting. I was thinking like of inserting it here somewhere when we post
yeah,
of the interview.
yeah.
That's really, really interesting. I wasn't able to get in when I went to Stockholm. When I visited like the Riksbank, it was Saturday, it was closed,
Mm,
but I only was able to see the outside of the building. It's
mm,
really, like you said, it's not, it's pretty, but at the same time, it looks cold
yeah,
and inviting. It's like,
uninviting. Yeah,
yeah, but it's pretty at the same
mm,
time. So you're like, oh, it's
mm.
some feelings. It's
Yeah.
like
Oh, it's
very,
fabulous art. But as you say,
yeah,
I think that it doesn't. It's not the kind of thing. Oh, I'll go inside there. I mean, obviously, once you get inside, it's nice to look at. But we sadly do too many. We've had a couple of open nights, but not many. And sadly, now we're renovating they've had lots of problems with the infrastructure. So
yeah.
next year we'll probably all have to move out. So we'll somewhere else, and they'll renovate it for a few years, and then we'll move back in again. So they replace ventilation and water pipes and all that stuff. So sadly, but that's so a year down the line, I suppose, or a year and a half maybe.
Yeah,
Mm,
but that's interesting and
mm,
amazing that it's so pretty from
mm,
the inside.
mm,
Thank you so much
mm,
for your patience, for
mm,
and for being here and
mm.
like informing us on this very rich and interesting history.
You're welcome. Just contact me again if you need a deep dive into any of the particular things that we've talked about.
Of course,